What I wanted to talk about today was how much I realized the importance of building an inner community over everything. And there is this certain diagram that I think I'll pull up to the side here of like these different circles, these relationship dynamics that you have in your life. And you have your like acquaintances, you have like your close friends, you have your mentors and your partners or your family. But at the center of it is yourself. And I think that one thing that helped me conceptualize it for myself when I was working on self-improvement and self-care was this importance of sort of building a home within yourself. I call it different things like level 1, level 2. I feel like level 1 was more about excavating and understanding your mind. I call it excavating the psyche, where when you kind of get to a certain age of adulthood, whatever that age may be for you. So for some people it's 16, for others it might be 55, where you really realize the importance of taking responsibility for your own life, creating your own reality, and really just realizing whether it be good or bad, anything that happened to you in the past, particularly when you were younger, is not your fault. And by fault, I mean that it wasn't your fault, but two, you weren't in the driver's seat of the dynamic. Whether you're a kid or you just didn't know better, whatever variation of ignorance that you may have lived under, someone else was leading the charge, for better or for worse, about the sort of rules and understandings of the world that you had. And I think when you get to a certain age, and obviously I feel like for me, it tends to be catalyzed by an event. And I notice in other people where you sort of have to get a contrast in your life where you realize, okay, I can sort of choose to take control of my life, whether it be something great like a promotion, or you skip a grade, or you graduate college or high school, or something negative like a breakup, or you lose money, or maybe you face some sort of disappointment in your life. I think there comes a time when you realize the importance of building your own world. But I think what tends to happen when we go into this sense of self-care and self-love is that you realize that if you realize that you're not in the driver's seat, you then have to kind of reverse engineer, why aren't you in the driver's seat of your own life? And I find that oftentimes it tends to be rooted in a lack of trust, knowledge, or acceptance of yourself. And I think that when you're on the journey of rebuilding yourself, getting to know yourself, you've trying to find that it almost doesn't feel as fulfilling as the external validation from other people or other things, whether it be money or someone else telling you good things about yourself, or, in some ways the external world validating who you are. And it almost feels like a gap. And so the work of building yourself doesn't feel as worth it as living for external things, like keeping up with the Joneses, or living for other people and what they expect you to become, like expectation, whether it be parental or societal or whatnot. Or even just old dreams that you may have had that you realize that you've sort of outgrown. But I think that what has helped me build foundation is the importance of building a home within yourself. And what does that mean? I think that, if you look at I love to look at mythology or archaeology or different stories, because I think they are timeless ways that teach us about ourselves, no matter who you are, where you are. A lot of times, we as humans kind of live the same stories over and over again throughout time. That's why movies mean so much to us. That's why books mean so much to us. And I think usually the more timeless the story, obviously the more everlasting it can be, which is why you can read a book like Shakespeare, but maybe something like a trend or some sort of fast fashion doesn't really exist for us consistently, because it more lives for the moment, not really for the lesson, the parable. And so one thing that I've sort of seen is that I think that we have a lot of these aspects of community that exist externally also live internally within us. I think that in some ways, we have our own mothers and fathers and sisters and teachers and enemies within us. And I think that by sort of almost using like a childlike imagination, when you sort of imagine that these things outside of you, like your barber or your teacher or your friend, can also reside within you, and you cultivate those sort of archetypes within you, it helps you to kind of feel self-contained. In every moment, we're all made up of little things. We're all made up of millions and billions of atoms, and every house is made up of individual bricks, but each brick has its own world within us. I know that sometimes people say it's actually kind of crazy to imagine that inside one person are trillions of pieces of little microorganisms and amoebas and atoms that all exist for the sole purpose of making you run. And when you think about that, it's almost encouraging, because you're like, damn, like, I'm just one person. I might be an ordinary person, or even if I'm extraordinary, I'm just one person. And I have all these different, what I believe to be faults and imperfections within me. But inside me lives an entire universe that literally runs for the sole purpose of making me get up in the morning, eat breakfast, watch my TV, scratch my elbow, like random stuff. And an atom's whole purpose is to make sure that you can just do this motion or think or feel every day. And so when you realize that, or you sort of embody this understanding that you have a whole world inside you, it becomes a lot easier to sort of let go of the daily issues, or sort of go past them. When you think of frustrations or difficulties, or just even negative emotions, I think that when you sort of, through the actual work of, taking care of yourself, whether it be fitness, or it be something like journaling, or it be getting a better job, or learning a martial art, or getting better at building great relationships, it almost encourages you, because you realize that if you sort of build a very self-contained organism, it's a lot easier to then reflect that externally as you go more and more outside yourself. Because I think everything in the world sort of reflects where you are in your mind. If you think about it, like, one example that I always love to reference is that if you look at someone's room, you can kind of tell the state of their mind. Sometimes when I'm going about my day or my week, usually, if I realize that my room is getting more cluttered, I tend to find that my mind is cluttered as well. And so when I clean up my room and I sort of organize myself, it becomes a lot clearer to think and to breathe, because I know that it was mimicking itself. And once you sort of recognize these patterns and understand yourself more and more, and you build this sort of, the way that you understand your best friend is the way that you should understand yourself. Like your sort of triggers or your habits that you do, you're like, okay, why am I doing this? Okay, I realize that I'm starting to sort of get hungry again. Is something coming up? Like, I find that it's hard for me to go to sleep. Am I stressed about something? And when you start to really get to understand and know yourself, and rebuild your mind, and rebuild your body, and rebuild your heart, I think the greatest accomplishment that you can have in this lifetime is knowing yourself more than anybody can ever know you. And it's not because you're not honest and open and trusting of other people to give them information about you, but more so that you've taken the time to really get to know yourself. Know yourself like a doctor would, like a therapist could, like a teacher would, after spending time with you. And I find that when I built that understanding of myself, a lot of things became easier, because I could then understand what I really wanted. I could then understand what I needed to really work on. And I think also building trust in yourself as well is part of that. And trust from that comes from a sense of competence within yourself. I think one is delusional belief is sort of the first 20% of believing that you can achieve this thing. But then the other 80% is the actual work. It felt a lot easier. For instance, like I finished writing this book that I've been trying to write for the past 4 years. Or not trying, but writing for the past 4 years. And I finished it, this year. And, every time I added a new chapter and I finished it up, it was definitely another coin in the bucket of belief in myself. But to really have a finished book now felt like it was less about whether trusting and having faith if I could accomplish this thing, but more about, now that I have achieved this outcome, it's more about what do I want to create next. And so there's a sense of relief that comes with that, because it's no longer of, if I can, or I know the importance of doing so, but now now that I know I can, what do I want to build? It's more of a choice and a feeling of like fear if I can fulfill this promise. So, I think that when you build an inner community within yourself first, which for me was sort of getting my mind, body, spirit together, it creates a foundation for yourself in terms of, you just feel self-contained. You just feel self-contained. It was really interesting. Like, I think it's all sort of come together now, because I've been sort of working on, I think, improving myself and whatnot since I was probably 19, 20. When I sort of put the pieces together for myself of kind of having a base of health and a base of mind and a base of, having my passions and hobbies, working on them on an everyday basis now, and just having them in part of my life and not feeling like I had to put off these things until I achieved a certain level of success or whatever. Just letting them be a natural extension of myself, like you probably did as a kid. You didn't feel like, oh, I only can work on this when I got an A or if I finish my homework. You would just draw and sing and dance whenever your heart would feel like it. And I think that by sort of almost getting back to basics, like real basics, like childhood basics, but combining it with the understanding and the maturity of an adult who can accomplish things, who can be competent, who can handle responsibilities. You sort of create this ecosystem within yourself that is self-sustaining. And it's more about a want to connect with other people. Not that you don't need others, but it's more about you need the role of people, not that you're desperate for people. And it sort of helps as you're building your life to then know that, you know, even when you're by yourself, it's enjoyable. And not in a sense of I'm sort of like, I can make it work, or I sort of can just maintain this until I then need to be around other people. It's like, no, like your life is almost so full that you have to really organize it to have other people be a part of it. You know, for me, in my instance, like of creating with YouTube and with martial arts and with music, as well as like my career, and also like just building other levels of competency, whether it be relationships or my style or whatever. I find that I have I have so many options for how I want to spend my day that none of that was mentioned with other people involved. Like I didn't even say going out to hang with friends, or even training with someone specific, or even going out to go do this. All the things I mentioned are stuff that I'm able to do by myself. And so when you have such a rich array of things that you can do by yourself, it almost makes spending time with people even more meaningful, because you know that even when you're by yourself, it's already meaningful alone. You know, you can laugh by yourself, you can enjoy by yourself, you can imagine and create by yourself. You can build by yourself. So when you join and add people in, it's almost the equivalent of, you know, you being this young child building these Lego blocks, and someone comes up to you and says, hey, you know, can I build with you? Can I join you in that? Or you go up to them and say, come help me with this. You know, it becomes more mutually beneficial. And so everyone's being poured into. And so one of my teachers once told me this, that if everyone takes care of themselves and everyone around them, then everyone is taken care of. You don't have to go so external to feel like, oh, I'm going to save the world or do all these things. When you really realize that if you take care of yourself and you take care of the people around you and everyone does the same, you don't have to do crazy work. So then building becomes way more sustainable. So yeah, that's why I feel like building an inner community is so important, because it gives you the foundation to then live a fulfilling life and really just embody a sense of fulfillment that it doesn't rely. It's almost like a self-charging battery. You know, you're always pouring into yourself, almost like this dam of energy that the water keeps circulating and I guess pouring back into you, and then it feeds itself again. And so you kind of create this just very healthy organism within yourself. So yeah, that's all I gotta say. Peace.